What's up, everybody? I'm the Sonoran Desert Grower. Today, we're doing some news that you can use. The title of this article I found is Drought Requires Ranchers to Take a Long View to Range Management. It's by Karen Schaffner, the Eastern Arizona Courier, and it was published in the Copper Era, serving Greenlee County residents since 1899. There's a picture here. The caption says, "The drought impacts everyone, particularly ranchers who have to consider possible future conditions of the range if they are to stay in business." Clifton. Drought conditions are nothing new to Ty Kelly, who, with his wife, owns the 6K6 Ranch. Situated between the upper and lower Blue River, they run cattle which graze on Apache Grease National Forest land. When you ranch during a drought, you have to take the long view. "We try to be sustainable, right?" Kelly said. "That's our main goal so we can continue to ranch in the future." Despite what weather forecasters are saying for Clifton this week, a possibility of rain almost every day according to weather.com, the area is still in a mega drought. It impacts everyone, particularly ranchers who have to consider possible future conditions of the range if they are to stay in business. It's all about the future. "We've worked with Forest Service over the last couple of years to come up with a drought plan," Kelly said. "Not like for this year, but a drought plan for several years. We know that if we get in dry conditions, then we have a plan." For Kelly, land management is never far from his thoughts because what's good for the land is good for us, he said. If you look at it from that lens, then you can manage drought a lot better than if you are worried about today and not thinking about tomorrow. To practice sustainability, Kelly said he moves his cattle from pasture to pasture, plants grass banks to save for later, and keeps unused pastures for what could be several years just in order to have a pasture bank to go in times of drought. So what he's talking about is he's growing, um, he has his grazing lands, but he's not running the maximum amount of cattle that he could. Um, he has a smaller flock of cattle, but he has a lot more feed for them, kind of just banked if they need it during a drought time. "Those are some of the tools we use for drought management on my place," Kelly said. "Most places do that. The technical term would be grass banking, but we just basically have pastures and reserves, so whether we have fire or drought or good times, and we try to do rotational grazing and sustainable grazing practices." Then there's the matter of water, because water equals power. Kelly is very much aware that the water he provides is for more than just his livestock. Wildlife drinks it too. He uses catchments which collect rainwater over a natural drainage area, tanks, even drilled wells and pipelines. In addition, water plays an unexpected role in how he gets cattle from one pasture to another. "You can move cows with water, right?" he said. "If you close off this water, they're going to go to a different water. Ultimately, you can control everything through water." On the other side of Mount Graham sits Tim Robinson's ranch, the O-Bar O. Robinson is acutely aware that he is a caretaker of the land and his livestock. Both he and his manager, Dustin Todd, stay up on the latest ranch technology because for them, ranching is also about the future. "We are considering all options for range management in the near future depending on what comes our way in the form of summer monsoons," Robinson said in an email. "Management of our herd size is one of the tools we have to work with when deciding how to successfully navigate available forage through each growing season. Currently, we have segregated the cow herd into two groups, one that seems to be well adapted to the current feed source, and the other is a group of cows that seems a little taxed by the lack of available protein in the pasture lands. We have added supplemental nutrients to the diets of both herds, but at different levels. For the immediate future, our food sources are adequate, and we're not in a situation where herd reduction is necessary." Finally, local rancher Jim Mingus is also careful with his resources. He uses a combination of smaller herds and very careful land management to stay ahead of drought conditions. We're stocked fairly moderately just because it has been drier than average since probably 95 or so, he said. So that's what I really like about folks that are in farming. They're not like big corporate agriculture. You meet guys like this who will refer to how things were back in 95, and it's like well over 20 years later, right? So I'll start over again this paragraph. We're stocked fairly moderately just because it has been drier than average since probably 95 or so, he said. We've cut back some. We're not totally, completely, fully stocked according to what our permits are for according to the Bureau of Land Management. And you do have a little more careful land management trying to keep the cattle in places where you're sure you're not going to do any resource damage. Back at the 6K6, Kelly looks at his livelihood this way. We're dryland farming on tens of thousands of acres, basically, he said. How we cut our crop is through cattle. That's ultimately our crop at the end of the day. How you manage that rangeland is the same way a farmer would manage his field, which is the same way a store owner would manage his store. Kelly is aware that his product is an important one. Even people who don't eat beef use beef byproducts every single day. Cows are in everything we use every day, he said. That gets overlooked. You can't drive down the road without using a cow, whether it's the leather seats in your car, the hard valve in your body, the insulin pumping through your blood. It's all coming from a cow. And that is something a cattle rancher would say, right? That's very cattle rancher-esque. And I come from a family that raised cattle um, in Mexico on 200 acres. So I definitely was feeling this article. I get where folks are coming from, and the what is going to impact cattle ranchers is lack of rainfall, and if they are growing, um, if they are irrigating parts of their land to grow forage for the cows, that's definitely going to impact them as well. It sounds like a lot of these folks are not doing that, and they are in areas where they have natural forage. Like, for example, if you live in Patagonia, you know that there's tons of grass that just grows. So it is kind of a good spot to raise some cattle or some goats or something like that. So here we are. That was a good article. So if you enjoyed this article, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you want to get access to exclusive tutorials around dryland farming, you should check out my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Sonoran Desert Grower. I have just published my dryland permaculture growing guide. It's a 100-page book that is exclusive to my Patreon community, so you can't get it on Amazon, or I'm not going to publish it on Amazon. It's going to be solely housed on my Patreon account. So definitely check it out. And I'll see you in the next one.